And we are live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the stream. I hope you're doing well. I hope you have a nice beginning of the week. It's been a while since we had an interview on a channel. I was away last week for work, so sorry about that. But I'm back. I'm back with another interview with a member of the European Parliament. As you can see on screen, we will be discussing tonight with MEP Vera Tax. So she is from the S&D groups on the left side of EU politics. She's 50 years old and she has been a Dutch MEP since 2019. So it's her first mandate. She's currently a member of the Committee on Transport and Tourism and a substitute in the Committee on Regional Development and the Committee on Women's Rights and Gender Equality. So of course, within this committee, as you may guess, she works mostly on transport and equality policies. As usual, before we start our conversation in our interview with the MP, I remind the house rules for anyone who would be new with us tonight. So our guest will be with us for about an hour. After that, she will go and enjoy the rest of the evening, while you will be stuck with me for another half an hour to discuss about what you thought of the interview, provide answer additional questions that I may not have been able to cover, or provide any additional context and just have a plain old discussion with you all. As usual, I've prepared my own questions for Miss Tax, and I have collected questions from you guys on Reddit and Discord. Of course, if you're watching this live, you can use the chat to ask, to suggest questions and react. The chat is there for this, so don't hesitate, and I will keep an eye on the chat and pick among your suggestions. But as always, don't spam and stay civil, but don't hesitate to react anyhow. The goal of these interviews, as you know, is to help you understand better, for starters, who your MEPs are, what they do, what is the job of an MEP, what they stand for, what policies you may know or not know happen at EU level, what are the political debates, that sort of thing. We will try not to go too deep into policy discussions, and we will not touch on national politics unless it's relevant to EU politics. So keep that in mind when asking your questions. And without further ado, let's dive into this. Good evening, Vera Tax. Thank you very much again for coming tonight to answer our questions. So you heard me doing my little introduction at the beginning, just a minute ago. Did I miss anything when I introduced you? Is there anything else that you would like to precise or to say about you before we dive in?
Well, it's always, first of all, hello, and it's really nice to talk to you and therefore with the audience of tonight. So that's, I'm really looking forward for this 1 hour together. And did you miss anything? I don't know. It's difficult in the European Parliament to have a focus on what you want to do because you have to do so much, or I would like to do so much. But I think maybe it's interesting that I'm also a member of the plenary from the Conference on the Future of Europe. For me, it was a really interesting journey, and so maybe that could be added.
Oh yeah, and we will definitely talk about the Conference on Future of Europe. So that's a good precision because I didn't know that you were involved in this. But before we go into the policy discussion, the Conference on Future of Europe, and all that, let's go back a bit and talk about you. What is your story? How and why did you go into politics and later became an MEP? What was the spark for you?
What was the spark for me? So I never dreamt of being a politician. And the spark for me was I finished my art education. So I'm an art teacher. And then I became an advisor for the National Parliament on art education. And then was for me the first time that I was really close into national politics, and we had this really good, advice for the Parliament. And then they decided upon our really good advice, and then it was like, I don't know, it was a mix-up and a compromise. And as a specialist, I thought, oh, okay, so if you really want to be in charge of how we could change the future for the better, it's the politicians who decide and not the specialists. So that was for me the first time that I kind of took interest in politics. And then this was all in The Hague. And then I went back to the region where I also already live. So I live at the border region. I live near the border of Germany, The city I live in is called Venlo, and it's near 5 minutes from the border of Germany. So when I got back to my city, I was like, okay, maybe it's better to be active in politics, because those are the people who decide, who are on the buttons, who decide on the future. And I guess I want to be a person like that. I want to sit on a table. I want to make it more sustainable and more fair future. And yeah, I think I trust myself being one of the person who sits on the buttons.
And so now you are in Parliament. You get to push the button and do what you not to say what you want, but at least influence what's happening. And one of your main committee is the Transport Committee. And I understand that you work a lot on issues related to truck drivers and their situation. So truck drivers have been a bit at the center of a lot of big political fights in the European Parliament over the last few years, notably in relation to the regulation of posted workers, so workers that come from one country and work in another country as part of a standing contract. So could you a bit explain how truck drivers suddenly became such a big European issues?
Yeah, I think it's also, I would like also to mention that this is also why I chose to be in the Transport Committee, because when I grew up, when I was a young person, my parents had a gas station, a fuel station near the roads near the highway in the Netherlands. So this is I was really raised together with truck drivers. And I saw the situation for truck drivers in Europe change, like when I was like 4 years old up until I was 20 and further on. And I think it's good that we have a European market. That's a good thing. But it also has a downside that truck drivers, they work a lot and they are not getting paid the best salary I think they should deserve. And also because of the transport sector is a really, how you say it, a market with low, with the high concurrency.
Competition, yeah.
Competition, yes, thank you. It's often on the expense of drivers, and I think it is important that we adjust the regulations so that also drivers are being well paid, and also that they are having a healthy occupation, because it's not always healthy, and I see a lot of difficult situations for drivers. Yes, and I want to change that.
And so concretely, what can the EU do to change the way truck drivers do their job?
Yeah, so what we did already on this was we changed, and it's called the mobility package. So what we did was what can we change for the better, for the safety for truck drivers, but also therefore for the safety of all people on the roads. And first of all, we managed to change that it's allowed for truck drivers to sleep in their cabins, but not when they have their regular weekend rest. So that's changed for the better, so that when they have rest times, then they really can rest, and it's not like you can stay in your cabin. So because that's not really, I don't know if you ever drove for a really long time, but if people then say, let's stay at the steering wheel, that's not healthy, and that's not a good rest. So that they really can have a decent rest, and also that they have fair payment. So we know that a lot of truck drivers come from the eastern countries, and most of the driving has been done in the west of Europe, and it's fine. But if it's not we shouldn't allow that Eastern drivers only drive in the Western Europe, and get paid by Eastern wages. So that's also what we fixed in this mobility package, that if you are a driver from abroad and you work a lot in another country, that you get paid the wages from that country.
And so in relation to these debates about truck drivers, one part of the, if I simplify things politically, we had back then on the one side we had the Eastern European countries who were saying, oh well, truck drivers coming from our country is a competitive advantage for us because they are less costly than a Western truck driver, and they are it's fair competition within the EU. And on the other side, we had the Western countries who were saying on the opposite. Well, actually, no. The using truck drivers from Eastern Europe at salaries and in conditions relevant to Eastern country was actually social dumping, and it was harmful for our economy. So where do you think where do you stand on this? Do you think that it was the previous practice before the reform, was it social dumping, or do you think, well, no, that's actually a bit of fair competition in there?
Well, I think it's always, if you put it like black and white, it's always difficult. I think it is important that we take care of the drivers, no matter from which country in the EU you are. And it is the case, the disbalance you described, it was there, and that is what we try to make better. So again, it's good to have competition, but it cannot be a competition at the cost of individual drivers, and that's what we try to fix with the mobility package. That in any case, if you are a driver from the Netherlands or from Poland, that you have the same wages and that you have the same working conditions, and that's important.
Okay. Still on the transport committee, but this time moving a bit to different means of transportation. So trains. I had a couple of questions about trains from people. First, people wanted to know what are the plans and incentive at EU level to get a more integrated rail network in Europe, but not just high-speed train.
Yes, it's one of the important topics in the sustainable future and the mobility. How can we ensure that trains are like a better that it is a way people like to use? Because I don't know if you know, but for instance, the CO2 emissions from all the train transport in Europe is only 2%. If you see that 75% of all CO2 emissions in no, I say it wrong way, but it's we have like 25% is by road transport. No, this is it. 75% is road transport, and then you have 13 by aviation. You have 11 by maritime transport, and you have only 2% for rail. So it's really important that we use train as much as possible for the transportation of goods and also for the transportation of people. But there's also a difficulty with rails because it's not one. We have one single European sky, but we don't have one single European rail network. It's a lot of difficulties, especially at the borders. I will not go into the details, but it's a lot of difficulties, and it's important that we change that and that we have better rules to make it more easy, that you don't have to wait so long with goods or with moving people at the borders, and also that we have a better ticketing system, because at the moment it's really difficult. If you want to have a plane ticket, it's quite easy to see where do I get there and how much does it cost, and that's really difficult. Much more difficult if you want to go by train across different countries in Europe. So there are a lot of things we have to change, and also we do that in the 10T regulation. That's a trans-European network. We're working on a lot to make train more easy for people to use.
And so, still on train, do you think that the focus should be on high-speed train to reduce the distances and so to make train more to incentivize the use of train compared to, for instance, plane, or should we develop as well? Let's say I don't want to call it internal train, but train lines at a more regional and local level to also make rail available beyond the big cities?
For me, it's both. I think the high-speed railway is really, really important, as you already mentioned, to have this with the competition with flying, because trains are more sustainable. But in the end, it's more difficult because those same rails are being used for all the cargo, and in the whole of transportation, cargo is not getting less; it's getting more and more. So we have more containers on rail as well. So, and we can only use save the same railway for people and goods. So that's the difficulty if you want to have high speed trains good available. I also think it's therefore really good that we focus also from a European perspective on the night trains, so that we bring back of them more. We used to have, like, I think 10-20 years ago, there were more night trains available in Europe, and that's getting back now. I see it in my own country, in the Netherlands. There are more tourism companies also making that available, so that you can, have a sleep in the train, and then you also at the place you want to be, and you don't have to take the airplane. So that's good. But also me being a regional person, I think it's therefore even important to also look at the regional network, because it's for a region really important from an economic perspective, and also for scholars, for students, to have good railway transportation. So it's not only high speed to the big cities.
I had a comment/question in the chat about how to make train more affordable, because someone in the chat was saying, yeah, but he would like to travel by train, but most of the time the plane tickets are much more expensive than taking the plane. So how could the EU, if the EU can do an intervention to act to try to make the price of train tickets more affordable? Or do you think that there is a cap at some point, you have to accept to pay more to take the train than to take the plane?
Well, yeah, you could say that, but from an environmental perspective. But I think, we all know that the cost of tickets is really important in our daily lives. That's the main decision often where you make your decision upon how much does it cost. Even if you want to be sustainable, you have to be also careful where you pay your money for. So I think at the moment it's not fair yet, because kerosene is not being it's not having a taxation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's not a fair competition between airplanes and tickets for rail. And also in a lot of countries there's no taxation on the tickets for airplanes, and it is on trains. So but therefore we as a European Parliament, we are not allowed to talk about the taxation on the value added tax. But that's I think it's a lot of member states themselves are having this discussion. Should we make our plane tickets more
expensive? Yeah.
So it's I think it will be more fair in the future.
I have a very specific question in the chat. I don't know if you're going to be able to answer. It's about the vignettes. So the question is, are there plans to make an EU-wide vignette for highways? And the person is using a very concrete example, because he's saying, I'm going to read it. If you travel from southeast, so for instance from Croatia, you need to pay 7-10 days vignette for Slovenia and Austria, which cost between 10 and 15 euros each. So Slovenia is 15 euro, but Austria has 3 tunnels, so with 10 euro each. So is there a plan for EU-wide vignette for highways?
Yes, it's called the Eurovignette. So the plans are there, are in place, but and then it is upon the member states to make sure that they implement that. But I also have to be really frank. This is something my colleague, Mr. Ferrandino from Italy, negotiated from the S&D. So I'm afraid I cannot elaborate more on that, how it in the specific how it works.
But there is definitely something in the works on that. Okay,
Yeah, it's called Vignette. Yes.
Okay, that's already good to know. Moving on to another different mean of transportation, and then we're going to move away from the transport committee. It's sea transport. So I had a couple of questions on that. One question is, and we have talked about maritime policy on the channel in the past, and one thing that we had discussed is the importance of sea shipping for world logistics. I think it was like 70 or 80% of the world trade that is maybe through sea, like containers are being transported from one place to another through sea. But at the same time, there is a challenge to make sea travel sustainable. So how do we make the balance between making sea transport green without breaking the system, or on the contrary, should we break the system and to make it more green?
Yes, thank you for this question. Yeah, it is super interesting, and also a lot of time far away from people. And if you already mentioned it, it's like even 90% of all the goods that we use, like, you know, televisions, shoes, everything, clothing, it's coming to us first of all by a European port. So this stuff all arrives at the European port, and then it's being delivered by rail or by truck to our stores and homes. So therefore, it's a lot of as I already mentioned, the CO2 emissions from the whole maritime sector is about 13%, and that's like average, like the what a country as Germany has on CO2 emissions in Europe. So it's a whole lot, and we're trying. It's an international market, so we have an international organization who's making rules and afspraken, agreements on that between all countries. It's called the IMO, the International Maritime Organization. And one of the reasons that in the Paris Agreement it's not having targets on maritime is because it is so difficult to have a political agreement on this. How could we make a sustainable maritime sector? And therefore it's up to the IMO. It was up to the IMO, but the European Parliament and also the Commission said, well, yes, the IMO says they want to reduce emissions and they have targets to reduce emissions, but then they don't have targets how to get there. And they still don't have concrete targets how to get there. So this is one of the reasons why this is the first time in the history of Europe that Europe has decided to be a front runner and to make own maritime targets to reduce shipping emissions and also air pollution, because you have emissions, bad for the environment, but also air pollution, also really bad for our air that we breathe. And now we have this legislation as part of the Fit for 55 package. It's called the Fuel EU Maritime, and we're trying to make not to say what ships should use as a fuel, but saying every ship who uses a fuel has to decrease in the CO2 emissions by the fuels used.
Okay. I have another question from the chat saying that there is apparently a lot of complaints about the single maritime window. I don't know what the single maritime window is, but apparently ports require different documents, not always accepting digital documents. So are there plans at EU level to further streamline the process so that documents are accepted all across European ports?
Yes, I think that's also a really important topic. That's not part of the Fuel EU Maritime, but that will be part, and that's a legislation. I think it's upcoming. I think it's even will be proposed by the Commission this year, or otherwise it will be in 2023. It's on the port control, and I think this will be a topic that will definitely be discussed then.
Okay. And final question on sea transport. So we discussed that, like you mentioned, 90% of the goods that we have in EU arrive through ports. We have a lot of EU shipping company, notably Dutch companies. There's a lot of Dutch company in shipping. But the person was underlying that, however, in the sea transport business, it's not Europeans that are being employed there. Even if it's European companies, most workers in sea transport are Russians, Indian, Chinese, Filipinos, etc., etc., etc. So, and like I mentioned, nationality. When you're talking about Russian and Chinese, it's, let's say, two countries that have difficult relations with the EU, to say the least. When you're talking about India and the Philippines, it's flawed democracy. So, how can the EU, let's say, trust its transport to people who are not from countries that are very compatible with EU values, or should we make EU transport more European, in a sense?
Yeah, it is also a really important topic, and I think it's difficult because as a member of the Social Democrats, I always trust people, and I think it's important that we have fair working conditions and that we have this in Europe. And again, it is not important if you're from the Philippines or Russia or the Netherlands. You should have safety on board for the people who are on board. They have to be sure that the people who take care of them know all the safety rules, but also people working should have a safe work environment and get decent wages. And that's difficult because the way it's being controlled is by the flag state. So as you know, every ship has an own flag it sails under, and that's in a lot of cases not the country the ship is from. And this is something I really would like to dive into together with my colleagues from the Ample committee, because how in the future could we make this better in Europe? Until now, we don't have European, rules for this, because it's the work employment rules under the state flag. But I think we should have a look up on that and also try to make it better, as we did in the mobility package.
Okay. Let's move on this time to your other committee, the FAM committee, so on your work on equality. So let's talk about the FAM committee in general, because I think you're pretty much the first one MEP we have from this committee. So how is the EU actually?
How many MEPs did you already talk to then? Just interesting.
In total, around 45, I would say.
Oh, and I'm the first on gender equality. Okay.
I mean, at least from the FAM committee in which we deep dive into it. So yeah, my question is, what is the EU actually? How can the EU contribute to concretely improve equality, or not improve equality?
Yes, well, I think this is one of the we don't have a lot of legislation in if you compare it to other committees. But we have important legislation. I will come back to that later. But I think and because I'm a member also on the LGBTI sub intergroup, because this is all about the values we stand for as a European democracy, and these are values that are like gender equality, and that a person can be whomever he or she, or even if you're non-binary, who you want to be in Europe. That's one of our core values, and those values are really at stake. I think, it's getting worse, even in member states being a member of the European Parliament, but also other, Russia, and it's these values are at stake, and therefore it's important to work on this and to be keen on that we already achieved a lot on gender equality and progressive values, but I want to achieve more on that, and also I want to defend those values because they are at stake. There is just to have an example, in the United States at the moment is the right for abortion is at stake. I don't know if you heard about that, but there is a leakage that het Hoge Rechtshof, that the court,
the Supreme Court,
the Supreme Court is having a concept of thinking about getting rid of the legislation they had based upon the law from 1973, where it was changed that there is a right to abortion in the US, and this is not something that is there because of, I don't know, Trump, or that Ruth Bader Ginsburg died a year ago. This is, even in Europe, it's a 68 million funded anti-gender funding. So it's a lot of millions from lobbyists who are really conservative. Again, I'm a social democrat, and democrat means for me everybody has a right to have a vision on the future, on how we shape the world. But I am the opposite of a conservative person, but it's a lot of money, $89 million just to promote anti-gender policies. So I want to be working on that, and that's why I think the Farm Committee is really important.
You just talked about abortion, and you mentioned Roe versus Wade, so the jurisprudence in the US. But if we look at abortion policy in the EU, there was, as you remember, there was a little drama in January when the new president of the European Parliament was elected, Roberta Metsola, because she's from Malta. Malta does not allow abortion, and actually Mrs. Metsola voted against a number of texts on abortion. But that's also something that all Maltese MEP were doing, including S&D MEP, the Socialist Maltese MEPs, voted against or abstained on texts related to abortion. So within your group, how do you deal with this kind of national position? Because you said, yeah, as a socialist, for me, abortion is an important topic. So how do you discuss this topic internally within the S&D when there are difference of views on that?
Yeah, I think this is one of the examples. This is a really, really difficult and difficult topic to discuss, because it has to do with your beliefs as a person, and it's right into the core of your beliefs. And I think in a good democracy, you have a good discussion, and you have a fair how you say it, the way you want to discuss about it, and then you have respect for people who have arguments why they cannot vote the same as you do, even in your own political group. I think that has to do with respect and democracy, and also because that's also interesting on the because the EU has no real power on abortion. Because it's difficult. It's a member state competence. But sometimes, if a member state wants to, how you say it? Sometimes it's difficult for me to talk about it, to explain it in English. Coming back to your question, it is important that we have a good discussion, but sometimes as an MEP, you are allowed to vote
differently,
as you think of from your country's perspective. And I think a good democracy and also a good political group has respect for values of people. Yeah, you mentioned can differ.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that you're part of the LGBTIQ plus intergroup. I got this right this time. Intergroup, yeah. And I got
everybody not being hetero, yeah.
And I got a question on this in the chat, which is does the EU have a strategy for Poland and Hungary when it comes to their anti-LGBT policies?
Well, we have an LGBTIQ policy. We have it has a name, but we have a policy, and there also we have action plans, but also values. And the strategy on countries that will not respect the values, our European values, is that we say, if you don't respect these values, then we will put the we will make sure that you can also not depend on the EU funding anymore, or as much as you would like. So, and this is something we could not do in the past, but because we have the RRF, how you say, the Recovery and Resilience Facilities, so
Yes.
a lot of money for also Poland and Hungary. And there we made sure as European Parliament that we make this thing that if you want to get this money, you have to be respectful to the values, and if you don't get that money. And this is in place, and it's a mechanism we put in place to make sure, and it is working. It's not working as fast as we would like as the European Parliament, because the Commission gives a lot of time to specific member states. But now the Commission made sure, like really recent, like a few weeks ago, they said, yeah, you really have to be in line with our values, otherwise we cannot give you the money.
So I had another comment on the chat. I'm trying to find it again, which was touching on an interesting topic. So we know that in the EU is actually losing population in a number of countries. The population is getting older because people are not having kids, and so there was this comment in the chat saying, oh, whether this contributes to the entire abortion sentiment in a number of countries. But setting aside the abortion aspect, how do you?
Sorry, I did. Oh, sorry.
Okay, I'm gonna repeat. You know that there is
had a bad connection.
Sorry. So you know that there is the issue that the EU is losing population. The EU is getting an older population.
Yeah.
How do we tackle? Do you think it's an issue to tackle the fact that the EU population is getting older, that we're not replacing a population with younger people, and does that play a role into the anti-abortion sentiment in some countries?
Yeah, for me, it's a strange comparison. I think it's an interesting question, and I'm also interested in how other people think about this. But for me, it's a strange comparison, because abortion rights for me has nothing to do with how many people we would like to have in the European Union. For me, this is all has to do with the rights for people who get pregnant to decide upon their own bodies, that it's not possible that a government decides what you have to do. It's in the end, it's a decision as a person if you want to. That's for me. So that has nothing to do with how many Europeans do we have. It's for me, it's a total other topic. And I think it's interesting if you say, okay, so we have. For the future and our jobs, it's important that we have a lot of also new Europeans. But I think then it's interesting. So how do we make sure that if people give birth, that they have this context of being able to do that, but also being able to go back to their jobs. And like that. So, for instance, we know in the Netherlands we call it the mom penalty. If you give birth to one child, you will definitely have a decline in your wages, and that's also not only if you're giving birth, but also even if you are a female person, because we have an average pay gap of 14% in Europe for people working as hard as they do, but then get 40% less just because you are a woman and not even giving birth. If you give birth, then it even gets worse because of your pension gap. So I think it's important that in Europe we think about how do we see stereotypes, and how do we make sure that people are being able to be a professional, but also to give birth to children. And if we make sure that we do that in a fair way, then I think there still will be a lot of children come to the world. But a lot of parents and a lot of mothers struggle. You know, we have to be available for work, but we also have to make sure we have families for the growth of Europe. And yeah, if you have to mix that in one person, if you have to do that as one person, I'm a mother myself of 2 children. That's not easy.
You just mentioned is the fact that women earn less money because they are women, especially when they become pregnant, they get let's say a hole in their pension and all that. Wasn't there like a EU legislation that got proposed or adopted on equal pay? I think the parliament voted on that a couple of weeks.
Where we work on, yes, definitely, thanks to Frans Timmermans and also Ursula von der Leyen and others. Yeah, I'm really glad with that. Yeah, it's called the Pay Transparency Law, and it means what we do is we normally you have to prove as an individual that you earn less money than your colleague who's comparable to you, a male colleague. And now we change it. So now we say it is up to the company to make sure and to make transparent that there is no pay gap in the company. So, and that's more easy because it's really difficult as an individual to prove that you earn less than your colleague, because then you have to ask for the wage, and maybe the colleague doesn't want to share it with you. And now we turn it around. So it's up to the employer to be transparent on that there is no pay gap in the company. And it's from an Icelandic. In Iceland, it's already in place. This law. It's okay. Copy paste Iceland law.
Oh, okay, interesting. So obviously you see that as a positive step to ensure like equal pay between men and women. But for you, what would be the next step if there needs to be a further step?
Well, I think if there also to mention this, because Iceland is like 12 years in a row the most gender equal country, but in the whole world there are no countries where we have a gender where there is gender equality. So it's sometimes difficult for me, and it's based if we're going the way we are going, it takes like 50 years that we have equal equality for men and women in Europe. So I think we have to work hard on that to make sure. And it is a lot of things we have to do. We have also now the legislation women on boards, so that also women are more represented in decision-making positions, because it really makes a difference. You know, I was always, I guess I always was a feminist, but it makes a difference if you are in a position where you can make a difference. Because if you are one of the people saying, this is not fair, if you are not in a decision-making role, you can say that. But if the decision makers are like, in general, more men, then they don't understand what you're saying. They just think, why isn't it equal? And I understand sometimes. I know most of the times I understand why, from a male perspective, you really don't understand, because if you don't see it, if you don't have those glasses on, you just don't see it. So that's why it's important to have more female leaders in place. So like gender diversity is important. And also for men, because I think it's important to mention that, because otherwise it is like, we fight for the position to make it equal, and it's not means that it's not pro-man, because I think there are a lot of fathers who would like to have more time spent with their children, but we expect also from dads that they work like full-time, another provider of the family, because that's also a stereotype we have in us. But that's also not fair, I guess, to fathers or men. If you would like to work not full-time, that should be all right, I guess.
Okay, now let's switch on to the Conference on Future of Europe, especially since you were involved in this. So on Monday, it was Europe's Day, but it was also the closing of the Conference on the Future of Europe, which lasted for a bit more than a year. So we've seen a lot of discussions following the recommendation of the conference, a lot of talks about changing the treaties, about the future of Europe, and all that. So my first question would be, do you consider the Conference on Future of Europe to be a success, despite the fact that it met relatively limited, let's say, popularity among regular citizens?
I think I'm nuanced on that. I think it was a great effort, and I think the effort had some nice results. I think the word success for me, it would be a too big of a word, because I think if you involve citizens, then you really make sure that the involvement and the time they put into that they see that they are being taken seriously, and they are being taken seriously. But for me, now we have the result is that we have 49 recommendations, and those are more than 300
Measures,
things we have to do. Measurements, yes, thank you. But we started up this co-creation to have ideas for the future, and now the citizens are they have done their bit, and now it's up to the 3 European institutions to make something from that. And I think for me, I did it already on a regional level, and sure, regional is maybe more easy because it's smaller, but if you want to achieve something together, then I think you really have to do it together and not still say, yeah, let's hear your ideas and then we will make something out of that. And in the beginning, when we started this procedure, this conference, it was not clear yet at the end of the conference how we would make the ideas of the citizens into legislation. So now we know, we say thank you for all the ideas. Let's and now we have them as the 3 institutions, and we will make something out of that. And I think it should have been better if we also had more involvement there of citizens. That's my opinion. But I think the ideas are great. I love them. They are really progressive, and especially I have one favorite, and that's that the veto is not being that in the future we should get rid of the veto momentum, and I think that's a good one.
I had a question earlier in the chat, which was if, let's say, there was a decision to make a new conference on the future of Europe next year. What would you make different for this future conference on the future of Europe compared to the previous one?
That's a good question. Yeah, what I would do, I would not, we have this whole European procedures, and then we had this conference next to it. A lot of work, a lot of people involved, and then we have ideas, and I'll give it back to the old system. And what I think would be far more interesting if we look upon our system and then say, how can we involve citizens better into the system? So, for instance, most of the political decisions are being made in the commissions, like the Transport Committee. So I think it would be more interesting, how can we involve the opinion of people interested in transport into that decision making? Because now it was like, it was also, we were asking people, what do you think on everything? And also, most of the people are mostly interested in Europe, but in a specific theme. So I think it would be better to know how could we involve citizens better in the system we already have, than building a new system along that.
Okay, interesting. So you just mentioned that you really like the idea of getting rid of the vetoes that currently exist in a number of policy areas. So I imagine from that you're in favor of reopening the EU treaties. And first question is, beyond the question of veto, would you support the idea of changing the treaty to also increase the power of the European Parliament?
Well, I'm not a person like let's open the treaties.
Okay.
Just by a mean, because no, you have to have a really good reason to do that. Only if you really think it's worth it. And I think the veto is worth it. Yeah. If you ask me, do you think it's important to have more power? Then my question would be, yeah, which power on what? Because I'm not an MEP saying, yeah, let's have more power to the EU. No, I think you have to. We are this democratic project.
I was speaking more specifically, more power not for the EU, but more power for the Parliament, the European Parliament. So, for instance, the ability of the Parliament to propose legislation, because now it's only the Commission.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the second favorite I have.
Okay.
And not to have more power. I think you could say it's more power, but also I think it's good that the European Parliament has the right to put in legislation. I think that would be a good one. I see that we have that in Dutch Parliament. That's possible, and it's really difficult to do that. It's not something you just. It's not easy, but I think that this would be a good thing for Europe, because the European Parliament and the democratic chosen people in the Parliament, they have really good ideas, and we have interesting ideas, and sometimes it's difficult. We have to wait for the Commission. Yeah, so I think it would be an interesting dynamic.
So in the conference, we had the Commission, we had the Parliament, but we also had the Council, so the member states. So I had a question from people in the chat asking, what do you think about how a number of countries approach the conference? So, for instance, at the beginning of the process, your country, the Netherlands, was not very enthusiastic about the Conference on Future of Europe, and we saw on Monday as well that I think 13 member states released a declaration saying that they were opposing any kind of reopening of the treaty. So, do you think that the member state missed the point of the conference, or how do you approach this?
Yeah, no, I don't think they missed it. I think this is the ever-going classical, not by all member states, but a lot of member states. It has to do about powers, who has the mandate, and a lot of member states think Europe has enough and shouldn't get more. But again, for me, it's not on should we open the treaty or not. It is not. I want to know on which content. What would you like to change in the future? And if it's necessary to then reopen a treaty, we should have a look upon that, and also have a look upon that. What's the downside for that? But only talking about I'm in favor on not to change treaties. For me, it's not. That's without a why, and I think every political decision without a why, what do you want to achieve, is only going about power, and that cannot ever be the goal.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So still on the conference on Monday, Emmanuel Macron, so as the country presiding the council for 6 months, made a speech at the conference, and he proposed an idea for a new kind of political community going beyond the current European Union that will allow countries that are not part of the EU to still have extended cooperation with the EU. So what do you think about this idea that Macron proposed? Is it something that is worth exploring, or is this just like a random proposal that doesn't make sense?
I find it interesting as a person. So I did not have my regular S&D checkup with that. As a person, MEP, I find that really interesting, because then it's not like you're in or you're out, but it's more like, well, you're in the European Union, or we have these satellite countries that are want to be more like a flexible, how you say it, flexible
membership. Yeah.
I find it interesting to think about that, and I don't have my head around it already, but I find it an interesting idea. How do you think about it? Can I ask that?
To be honest, I haven't looked too much into the details, so I don't have a definitive idea, an opinion on this. But 2 points. One that is being made already by the chat, which is we already have to an extent something like that, which is the European Economic Area, where some countries already cooperate further with the EU. Then, if you remember, during the Brexit negotiation, there was a whole debate about cherry picking. We didn't want the Brits to cherry pick the parts they liked about the EU and not having to deal with the obligation. So isn't this new idea, even if it's for now it's only a speech, so we don't know how it would work in concrete, is it not in the end going back to an idea of cherry picking of countries saying, oh well, I like this obligation but I don't like this one, and pick and choose what the EU is or not. But again, we on my side, I would have to see a bit more details. What it actually.
Me too. I didn't see details, but that's interesting also for if you later on, if I leave this meeting and you have, it's an interesting topic. I'm interested in this.
Oh, I'm sure we'll definitely have a discussion on that with the chat. Which brings me to my next question, and it was a bit like that. There's been already a number of debates on the idea of a multi-speed Europe. So we could have a part of Europe that could go further, that could go faster, and another part of Europe, or EU or beyond the EU, that would go slower and only work together on limiting things. So do you support this idea of a multi-speed Europe, or do you think that the EU should work as a bloc and everyone gets moves together, or not?
Yeah, for me it's like the multi-speed. For me it's more difficult because I really believe in alone you are faster, but together you come further, and especially this has also to do with the fact that I am active on the regional committee, because this is why we have the committee on regions and also the regional development, because Europe can only go further into the future if we are one Europe, and this means we have the same speed and we are all different, but we try to achieve the same goals and have the same values. And I think if you have different speeds, that's going to be really difficult. I don't think then we could be as united as we are, because now we are as united because we understand why others cannot be that fast, why there are differences between countries, and we have to be solidarity on that. And I think if you have different speeds, for me it sounds like impossible to have this unity. But also interesting in your thoughts on that.
Again, on this, I don't have a set view, because I would say that if you allow multi-speed Europe, you take the risk of leaving the other behind. That's kind of the risk, and that defeats a bit the purpose of having a union. And we know that in Eastern Europe, the countries are a bit afraid of the multi-speed Europe, because they see that as a threat for them, because the Western country want to leave us aside. They don't want to give us the money to help us develop our country. So we're going to be the losers in a multi-speed Europe. So to an extent, that I can hear them saying that that defeats the purpose of a political union, of European Union. But well. And another question, this time on the enlargement of the EU, another topic that is being discussed a lot, notably related to Ukraine. So Ukraine is likely going to be a candidate country. The council will probably take the decision next month. Macron on Monday said that, well, even if Ukraine was to become candidate country, it would probably take decades for them to join the EU. Otherwise, we would have to lower the standards that countries have to respect before joining the EU. So, first question: do you agree that indeed Ukraine, it's not realistic for Ukraine to join the EU before a long time? Otherwise, we would risk threatening the level of requirement for to join the EU, or not?
I think it's important that there are two things. So the war in Ukraine is devastating, it's terrible. We have to do as much as we can to help. Just also because of democracy. But being a member of the EU, we have a real, this is thought about really well, how we should do that, and what you have to do as a country to be a member. And I think we cannot be, making exemptions on that, because it is really important. Also because now, for instance, like we see, like Poland and Hungary, we could not imagine that member states who would achieve our values then would come back on those values. and so therefore we don't have anything in place, or almost nothing in place. So I think it's really important to be rational on that, and to say this is the procedure for every country, and for me that is also on Ukraine. If there is a war or not, I think it's important to have a rational decision on that. For me, those are two different things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And still on the country.
Also, for instance, just to have a mention, we talked about the LGBTI issues. Well, it's in Ukraine. I think this is a value. I think it's difficult for a majority in Ukraine, and therefore I think if they would like to join, they have to understand these values and have to really acknowledge them.
Speaking of values and countries that want to join the EU, so there's currently 5 countries that are officially candidate to join the EU, and a few of them are considered a bit problematic because they're taking a path that is a bit different than the EU in terms of value. And we can think about Turkey, of course, but also Serbia, that is more and more following the lines of Russia, for instance. So do you think that at some point countries that are candidate but that go a path that is not compatible with EU membership, the EU should be able to say, well, okay, you were candidate, but now you don't fit the bill, so thank you for coming, but that's not going to be possible? Or should we keep them a bit in a form of limbo, to just keep them, let's say, around, and I don't want to say under control, but have a look at what have an ability to influence what they're doing?
Well, I think so. Therefore, we have these procedures, and we have this way we and it takes a long time. And I think the world can change sometimes even in 1 week. So for me, it's not keeping them in limbo, but it's more like, are you really committed to be a candidate, or do you want to be a candidate because you think you have a lot to gain with it? So I think it's not only procedure to be zorgvuldig, but also to get to know each other, and that governments really understand what it means, and also the people of a country really know what it means, especially on our values. And those are sometimes the most difficult things to defend, and I think we have to be really keen on that. So it's not keeping them in limbo for me, but it's like a really serious, it's not like a pair of shoes you can just buy and then say, well, I don't like them anymore. Yeah.
Okay, final question for you, traditional question. Where do you stand on the debate on whether the EU should become a federation or not? Are you in favor? Are you against? Are you on the fence?
In this case, I'm not black and white. I think I always say, I mentioned in the beginning, I'm an art teacher. I like the building in Strasbourg. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's a cylinder and it's not finished. If you see it as it's not finished. And this is the European project. It is a European project. We have our common values. We are a democracy. We are not an official democracy like a finished one, but we are making a democratic project, and this is never finished. And sometimes the time asks from us to make changes. So, for instance, COVID. Due to COVID, we made changes. We were working together on medicine, and sometimes you can lose something because it's possible to lose something. So for me, I'm not like, do you want this or that? It's a beautiful democratic project, and let's work on it.
Okay.
I know maybe it's a difficult answer to a simple question, but I really believe it. It's never finished.
There's no right or wrong answer. It's an open question. We've heard a lot of different views on that.
But I have a lot. I think I speak a lot of this question. I hear a lot, and I'm always a little bit like. For me, it's interesting because I think, but there's a middle way. Why is it always that people want to know if you either this or that. And for me, it's like so obvious. It's a democracy we work on, and it's never finished.
Yeah, I see. Well, it's been an hour, so thank you a lot again for taking the time to answer a question. Before you leave us, if there is something that our viewers need to remember from the interview with you, what should be the message they should remember?
The message they should remember, I don't know, they have to remember for themselves, but I think democracy is something we work on every day, and I find it really nice that there were a lot of people participating tonight, and I will really watch the discussion afterwards later on if it's on YouTube, because I'm really interested. This is something we do together, and thank you for your time.
Well, thank you again. Chat, make sure to thank Miss Tax for her time. I forgot to put your Twitter account in the description. I will give you, chat, it in the coordinates so that you can follow Miss Tax on Twitter if you want to. And, well, Miss Tax, thanks again. Chat, stay with me. We're going to start the debriefing. Miss Tax, I wish you a very good evening and hopefully see you soon. Well, talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Alright, guys, tell me everything. Let me remove Zoom. Bim bam boom. That's done. So, yeah, I don't know why I forgot to put the Twitter. It's probably I deleted that by mistake. Well, my bad. I will give you the Twitter account if you are interested. Well, actually, it's pretty simple. It's just a first name and a last name. So, Vera Tax. Oh, there you go. Am I going to watch the Eurovision? No, I'm not going to watch the Eurovision. I have to fix the thing with the chat. I really don't like the new look of the chat. It's in orange. It's not very visible. I need to change that. I hate it. I need to do it. Why am I not watching the Eurovision? I've never been a big fan of the Eurovision, to be honest. I think the first time I watched it was like a few years ago with my flatmates. It's fun to watch. It's pretty fun to watch. I agree, but I never got addicted to it. Like I know that a lot of people are absolutely addicted to it, but for me, I don't know. Every once in a while, yeah, okay, why not? I can watch a bit, but I don't put it on my calendar. Oh, that's Eurovision night. I have to watch it. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, until like a couple of hours ago, I completely forgotten that today was the Eurovision. But I mean, I know that the time I watched it, there was some very good song. I remember one. When I watched it like a few years ago, it was the winner was I think a Portuguese singer. He had a very good, beautiful song. But well, anyway, I'm not watching the Eurovision tonight. Sorry, sorry about that. Anyway, also I think I missed a lot of questions and comments during the interview. Sorry about that, because I mean there was a lot of activity in the chat, and I was looking at the time and said, "Oh my god, we're going to spend an hour discussing about transport and women's rights, and not cover the Conference of Future of Europe." So I had to skip a few questions, unfortunately, but we can cover that in right now, actually, if needed. Oh, actually, I forgot to put you the voilà. That's ad for Twitter. So let me look at my notes and see what we discussed. So yeah, we discussed a lot about truck drivers, because indeed truck drivers were a big political issue in the EU, mostly at the last mandate. There were huge fights in the European Parliament about what is called posted workers. So like I explained, the not LGBT truckers, just regular truckers. Or more precisely, posted worker truckers. So truckers usually come from, let's say, Poland, and then drive to deliver shipment in France, and then on the way back, they transport things in France before going back to Poland. So there was a lot of criticism about this practice, because, like I mentioned, some see it as social dumping, because of course the Polish driver that is being employed does not is under Polish law, is not under French law in this example. So that means it doesn't have the same level of requirement when it comes to not the same cost. So it's considered unfair competition compared to French truckers, for instance. For Polish drivers, it's exempt. Well, that's the perception, indeed, in Eastern Europe, and that's why there was a big political fight in European Parliament and beyond, because Eastern countries were saying, well, that's if you want to regulate that, and so the amend what is called the posted worker regulation, so the rules about the use of this kind of workers, that's discriminatory against Eastern Europe, because this is a competitive advantage. Our drivers are good. It's not our fault if the people prefer to hire Polish drivers compared to French drivers. In the end, the compromise that was found was that posted workers have to follow let's say the social legislation of the country they are in. So let's say the Western EU countries past an amount of time spent in the country, and when they are on the way back from the country, they can't do like the regional delivery, what is called cabotage, for a number of time. It's called a cool down. So for a number of days, you can't do these kind of things to, let's say, ensure a fair competition between let's say the French truckers and the Polish truckers. But yeah, like you're saying, I'm behind. Indeed, that's what you're saying is the argument that we were hearing from the Eastern Europe countries, saying, well, Western EU has its advantage, cheap workers is our advantage, so that's only fair competition there. But that was, in Western Europe, the Polish drivers, and even before that, the Polish plumber, for the French people here, if they remember 2005, was a big political debate, and one of the reasons why Euroscepticism actually grew in Western countries, because they said, oh well, the Eastern worker is stealing the work of the Western worker. So that's, if you remember, that's also something that we heard in Brexit. But all that to say that there were big political fights. Another point that I want to say was not in the interview. I saw it in the chat and I want to react to it. I forgot who said that, and it doesn't matter. Saying, oh, but what are her qualifications? How is she qualified to talk about transport policy? Because only qualification is that her parents were owners of a fuel station. So I'm sorry to break it to you. You don't have to be a trucker to make legislation about truckers. In her case, the fact that her parents had a fuel station, that was you as well, I'm behind. The fact that her parents have a fuel station doesn't make her a specialist about truck driving, about truck policy, that's for sure. But that's what makes her interested in the field, and that's perfectly legitimate. And so that's why she said, oh well, when I'm in Parliament, I want to work on truck policy, because when I was young, I grew up around truckers, so that's an issue that is dear to me. And then that's as part of a political work, she will gather expertise. She will meet people, she will read studies, she will do work, and so she will become qualified to talk about truckers in this case, because she will get she will get the information that she needs to be qualified to talk about that. But you don't have a requirement to be qualified before becoming a member of Parliament to be able to talk about this. Otherwise, that means that only people who do the job could legislate their own job, which could lead to a number of other issues. Opposite issues, where they only do things that arrange their own profession, or etc. etc. Yes, but why? Why what? Why is she working on trucks? Because she wants to work on trucks. that's if that's what she wants to do, good for her. I'm not going to tell her what she's supposed to work on or not work on. She chose to transport because of her parents. She chose to. That's her choice. Also, there's a few things there. Sometimes you choose the committee you are in, and so because you have a particular interest in the field, and that's that's up to the MEP. I mean, the MEP is free to choose to work on what he wants, and then also you can get assigned a committee, in the sense that you can say, like for instance, she's in the REGI committee as well, so the regional policy, the regional development committee. Maybe she just ended up there because there was room for a Dutch MEP there, and so she ended up there, even if initially she was not a favorite committee. But then she worked on it, and you grow to do things that initially you were not expecting to work on. That's part of the job of being politics. Anyway, moving on this. All that to say, you don't have to be pre-qualified to work on a specific topic when you become an MEP. You acquire qualification as part of your political work. Where else did we talked about? We talked about night trains. I took a night train. I wanted to say that during the interview, but I didn't, because I mean, gives a shit about me, about whether I took a train. But yeah, I took a night train for the first time in decades. Not decades, but in a decade at least. That was not too bad, I have to say. So, good on night trains to be back. We talked for a while about abortion. So for those of you, how was my trip? My trip was fine. I was going to Germany. Generally speaking, it was okay. I didn't sleep a lot, but that comes with the territory. Night train is like a teleport. It depends if you can sleep throughout the entire trip. Wasn't my case, but it wasn't too bad. I mean, it was not a horrible experience. I would not do it every weekend, but not a bad experience. Let's go back on topic. Abortion. So she mentioned the fact that in the US there is the overturning of the previous jurisprudence of decision of Supreme Court of the US, which is called Roe versus Wade, which was legalizing at federal level abortion policy, and now that became the Supreme Court decided to come back on that, and so opening the way to a number of US states to restrict further, if not forbid, in a number of cases, abortion, which of course created a big outcry in the US, but also in Europe. Why do I mention that? Because I mentioned that during my question. In January, when the parliament was re-electing its president of the parliament, as it is customary every 2.5 years, and here it was even more necessary because the previous president, David Sassoli, died unfortunately in January. In January. That's it. So they need to elect a new president, and the lead candidate was Roberta Metsola, who was elected after that president of the parliament. So she is an EPP Maltese MEP, and there was a lot of drama at the time of the campaign because MEPs were saying, "Oh, how can we elect a president of the European Parliament who is opposed to abortion? It sends a terrible message to Europeans." And outside, it's terrible. Let's not vote for Roberta Metsola, even if she's very qualified. She's very much appreciated around by her colleagues, etc. But we've seen the topic of abortion making a comeback in the EU at the favor of at the time of the election of Roberta Metsola. And also, she mentioned that abortion is not an EU competence. Which is true, it's a national competence. And interestingly enough, for instance, Malta, when Malta joined the EU, they joined the EU on one specific condition, which was annexed to the accession treaty of Malta. The condition was that the EU would not try to force Malta to get rid of its anti-abortion legislation, because in Malta you can't make abortion in most cases, and so as a condition for Malta to join the EU, Malta got the agreement from the EU that the EU would not try to force Malta to come back on its abortion legislation. What else did we talk? We talked about LGBT. She mentioned the fact that right now there is a bit more tools for the EU to act when a country has anti-LGBT policies. So, for instance, in the case of Poland, where there was the so-called LGBT-free zone. So we had a bunch of cities and regions declaring themselves LGBT-free zones. So zones where LGBT people were not welcome, or at least not welcome to show that they are LGBT. They say it's propaganda, but it's not propaganda. They're just being themselves. And so the EU hit back at that by basically telling to the region and the cities there, well, if you declare yourself LGBT free zone, that means that you put yourself in conflict with the values defended by the EU, and because of that, the EU will not be able to give you EU money in the future. And because of that, well, a number of cities and regions said, "Oh, well, actually, we're no longer LGBT free zone. Give us the money." So that was a bit of a successful pressure that was made by the EU to try to get municipalities and Polish municipalities back on track. And we see also the similar things being done as part of the recovery fund. So the COVID recovery fund, which is being withheld in the case of Poland, notably because of LGBT policies, but not only, also because of rule of law issues, and of course the rule of law mechanism that we discussed in the past that allows the Commission to withhold EU funds when there are problems of the rule of law in countries. What else did we talked about? Conference on Future of Europe. It was actually interesting a position in the sense that, okay, she said that she was not completely happy about shit. I read your comment, Ikaros, and that threw me off track. No, this chat is not only feds only. Shit, I forgot what I was going to say. Yes, she was a bit critical of the conference, saying, "Oh well, it was not as successful as it could have been. It's a bit all over the place. That's all a thing." Ikaos loves the federal EU ID. He loves that. The Federalist Mulchi has been thrown. I'll let you brief people on the EU Federal Union. It's not for anyone to be happy with the conference. I agree. I mean, you've heard me rant about the Conference on Future of Europe and dunk on it enough to know that, there is a number of things that are not ideal in the Conference on Future of Europe. Even if, like she said, it was a good thing that people were there to discuss, etc., etc. But well, it's not the best tool in the world. Far from it. Also, I thought it was interesting that she said, "Oh well," she was going a bit against the vibe that we hear right now in the parliament. Say, "Oh yeah, let's reopen the treaty, let's reopen the treaty, let's reopen the treaty." Because she said, "Oh well, actually, reopen the treaties for the sake of reopening the treaties. That makes no sense. Let's just agree first on what we want to change, and then see if it requires changing the treaties," which I thought was interesting. Because it opens the room to say, okay, it's not like the treaties are not a totem that we absolutely need to change, even if changing the veto, so the fact the limited number of policies on which member states have vetoes. So, for instance, on taxation, on foreign policy, that sort of thing, that requires reopening the treaties. But well, what else do I have there? We talked about accession to the EU, so the fact that we need to maintain a strong requirement to join the EU, otherwise we're weakening the EU as a whole. So that's one of the arguments used to say that Ukraine is not going to enter the EU anytime soon. And we discussed a bit about the problematic candidate countries, Turkey, Serbia, those kind of countries. Where she said, well, that no, we should not kick them out of the candidate status. We should keep them around and, well, tell them it's a process. Are you ready to join us? And then do the work and join us. And there are other arguments, for instance, notably in in the case of Serbia and the Balkan states, saying that we should keep engaging with them, even if, in the case of Serbia, they're not going in a direction that we like, because if we, let's say, remove for them the perspective of joining the EU, then other countries will use the opportunity and put them in their own sphere of influence, namely Russia, namely China. And so we don't want, let's say, a pro-Russia, pro-Chinese enclave right in the middle of the EU. And so there is an interest. It's a question of geostrategy as well for the EU to make sure that the Balkan states stay close to the EU and ultimately join the EU. Okay, I saw there was a bit of conversation in the chat. I missed part of it, so let me walk back up. Okay, we're still talking about the choice of committee. Where people are from, Slovakia, Croatia, welcome, welcome. Were they the only one who received? No, Slovenia had elections recently. And the Prime Minister Janša got kicked out after this election. Do you know anything about the relationship between Poland and Ukraine after the war in Ukraine? I don't know anything about the future. Poland and Hungary. Okay. Yes, I do know a few things about that. So, for those of you who don't know, so Poland and Hungary are the two problematic child of the EU these days because of the rule of law, where both the Polish government and the Hungarian government took their country in a direction where that is not very compatible with the rule of law, and which, of course, puts them on, let's say, difficult position towards the EU, because the EU is supposed to defend the rule of law. So, for instance, we're talking about independence of justice, about the school systems, that sort of thing. And traditionally, Poland and Hungary were big allies on this, especially if they were part of an informal alliance in the EU called the Visegrad Four. So it was an alliance, an informal alliance between Poland, Hungary, the Czech Republic, and Slovakia. So they were working together to try to agree on their position in the EU, and so then defend their views at EU level. And traditionally, like I said, Poland and Hungary were helping each other whenever one was having a problem with the rule of law, the other was backing him so that the Commission could not sanction them. Now, the war in Ukraine created a tad bit of an issue in this love story between Poland and Hungary. Why? Because Poland is very much opposed to Russia, and they're very big supporters of Ukraine for obvious political and historical reasons. The Polish are not very fond of the Russians. Problem is that Hungary, on the other end, decided to be very critical and very critical of sanctions that the EU would adopt against Russia. Like, for instance, right now, Hungary is blocking sanctions that, is blocking a ban on Russian oil in the EU. So the fact that member states would be forbidden from buying in a year time Russian oil, and so to try to starve out the Russian economy. And so the Hungarians are blocking the decision because they don't want that. And generally speaking, they were very reluctant to provide support to Ukraine, military equipment, that sort of thing. And that pissed off quite a bit the Polish, who considered that the Hungarian government is being too friendly with Russia, that is irresponsible, is not providing support to Ukraine, etc., etc. And it's getting to the point where, for instance, the alliance that they had until now is being threatened, including within the so-called group Visegrad 4, because like a few weeks ago, or a month ago, I don't remember, there was supposed to be a Visegrad 4 meeting in Budapest, and on defense policy, And the meeting was cancelled because Poland decided that they did not want it to go into Hungary, given that Hungary was supporting Russia. Well, not supporting Ukraine, so they consider it's supporting Russia. As well as and the Czech Republic was agreeing with Poland. So in the end, there was no meeting of the Vignette 4 because of that. So the relationship between the two countries is very complicated, and there are temptation within the EU and notably the European Commission to use this new difficulty between Poland and Hungary to try to move forward on the issue of the rule of law. So in a bit of a divide and conquer kind of strategy, meaning that Poland will stop supporting or support less Hungary in the context of the issue of the rule of law because they are pissed off about the Ukraine situation. But well, it's not yet there. But to answer the question, yes, I do believe that the Ukraine war will leave a mark on the relationship between Hungary and Poland, especially if Hungary keeps blocking, for instance, the ban on Russian oil. I hope that does answer your question. I'm behind. To tell me if you need anything further in terms of information. Even if it wasn't that much post-Ukraine war, but like the current situation. Let's see. Where else do we have? If I were a pro ever closer union federalist, which would be my personal strategy toward the political unity of interest it requires? Is the question for me, Chaos, or is it for someone else? Because I mean, you know, I'm a recovering federalist, so for me to define a strategy to do something, I'm not necessarily convinced of, at least in terms of feasibility. Okay, it was for me. Let me attempt something. I'm LARPing as a federalist now. Yeah. Okay, I'm LARPing as federalist. So what would I do to create the political unity required for ever closer union? Very difficult question, because that's asking me to put aside my criticism on the matter. The key issue is to create a political appeal. For that, you need either crisis to make it necessary for competencies to become federal, but you also need to create an appeal in the population. And that's where things get really tricky. So either you need to have very successful EU policies over time, because that's not something that will happen very fast, but something that will make citizens very attached to the EU with popular policies. Of course, that means that you need to have a lot of information and media talking about the EU, so that citizens know actually what the hell is happening, what the EU is about, and so that they understand what the EU is doing. So you, in a way, you need to start building a EU nation, so to say. And then there will be a shit ton of work to be done on the entire architecture, because I mean, you can't like apply the, let's say, the US federal model or the German federal model, copy paste it and say, okay, that's going to be the European Union now. That can't work. It's not adapted to a space like the European Union with many different nations, many different languages, so on and so forth. So you would really need to invent a specific model for EU federalism there. But the problem is that it's not a strategy that can be done on a 5-10 year scale. It would take decades. It would literally take decades. In other words, solve the chicken and eggs issue and just watch a nation be born and presto. To an extent, yes and no. Yes and no, because I think in this case it will be the action of the EU that will make a EU nation, like, or a pseudo EU nation, be born. Is federalism even the right model for a better Europe? That's a good question, Andres. And I mean, that's again that touch back on a topic we had discussed on a previous interview. It depends on what you put behind the word federalism. Is it a US model? Is it a German model? Is it a Spanish model? Is it just talking about EU integration? Federalism, you ask 10 person, 10 different people, you have 10 different definitions of what is EU federalism. So I think you would have to agree on what you want. And I think there was an MEP who was saying that in a previous interview, I don't remember which one, was saying that he didn't like the word federalism because it was creating tension and anxiety with people when we were talking about federalism. So he said, talk about EU integration, but don't talk about federalism because it creates anxiety that is not needed. Well, if you talk about EU integration, then people are more like, okay, they're more open to it. They don't get into hyperventilation when they talk about it. But I mean, like Andrew is saying, I'm not convinced that classic federalism is the right model for the EU. More integration, definitely. There's no debate about that. More democracy at EU level, definitely, etc., etc. But I'm not a federalist. I just want to make the EU more democratic. Yeah, I mean, again, it depends on what you put behind the word federalist and what are the limits to it. But to this day, I will agree with Andros that I don't think the federalist, the classic federal model as a constitutional model is the right model. You would need to invent something very specific for the EU for it to work, and then that's the debate you need to have. What would work at EU level? Because there are tons and tons and tons of different issues that you need to tackle. The difference of languages, difference of history, or difference of political traditions. Where do you put? What level do you put of? What level of? I don't want to say democracy, but election-wise, how do you organize that throughout the EU? I mean, it's a nightmare to sort that through. Anyway, okay, no, that's not for me, so that's fine. Let me look at the time. Oh yeah. There is no classic federalism. Every one example of federal state is different. EU would be also different. Yes, indeed. That's why I'm talking about US federalism, German federalism. Spain is not exactly a federation, but de facto it almost is. You're right. There is no absolute classic federalism. But the model that currently exists would not work at EU level. That's what I mean. So yeah, you would. That's what I'm saying. In the end, you would have to invent something that is specific for the EU. Does it fall within the definition of federalism? Is it confederation? I don't know. That question remains to be discussed. And in any case, that's not going to be anytime soon, and that's going to require a lot of work. Because you can't create a EU federation or confederation against the wish or in the back of people. They need to embrace the thing. Otherwise, it's just an empire. It's not. That's not something that you want, and it's not something that usually has a happy ending. Anyway, looking at the time, let me close up because I'm rambling and I don't believe that I'm providing a lot of added value there, unfortunately. So I will wrap up. So I hope that you enjoyed the interview. As always, if you enjoyed it, do follow the channel. If you're feeling mighty generous, you can even subscribe to the channel. You can even toss a coin to to your streamer via Coffee. You can follow me on my other social media. You have the link right now in the chat. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Next time I see you this week is on Sunday for the news review. And I hope to see you there. So on this note, I wish you all a good evening and see you soon. Bye everyone.